Hey guys, it's Jessica. Today I want to talk about the relationship between authors and their readers. Specifically, I want to discuss whether or not authors have to only like or enjoy fan art that is book accurate for the characters they designed and created. I've written my own book. It's called Follow Me, Tattered Veils. It's an urban fantasy, new adult fiction novel that's available on Amazon. It's available both in Kindle Unlimited and as an ebook, and obviously as a paperback format. Part of what is interesting about this conversation, like from an author standpoint, is like you can see I have the main character Roxy right here on the cover. This is not what Roxy looks like, and it's not even how she's described in the book. There are some elements of this character. She is a curvier lady. She does have black hair. Her hair is actually a lot curlier. It's like ringlet curls, and it's a lot longer. Besides that, she does have tattoos like you can see here, but number one, the tattoos wouldn't be on the front of her chest. They would be on her arm, going across her full back, and they're full color tattoos. And there is a description of the different kinds of tattoos that she has and what they mean to her. It doesn't cover every single one on Roxy's body, even though I do actually have a document that maps it out. Other than that, Roxy's eyes in this picture are blue, and my character has dark brown eyes. I'm not even really 100% sure if I would say like the facial expression and the facial features this woman has are 100% accurate to how I picture Roxy, or even how I describe her in the book. I still thought that this was the best representation. It had enough similar parts and appeal. So if people enjoyed my book and liked it enough to create fan fiction, and I got a lot of Roxys that looked like this out of it, I'd probably end up liking, acknowledging, and resharing pictures of Roxy, even though really, if you pay attention in the book, her brown eyes are mentioned several times. Her long hair is mentioned several times, and this is like shoulder length. If you drew something that looked like the cover, I would understand. If you drew something that was closer to how I described her, I would be okay with that. And if you drew Roxy in a different race or gender or anything like that, chances are pretty good that I'd like that too. Roxy's gender, her race, all of those things, they play a little bit into the story. I do think there's something distinctly feminine about the story, and her ethnicity, specifically as Italian heritage, plays into the story, but not so much that you couldn't rewrite her race and gender and still be telling the same story. All of that is free game. And if you made Roxy really overweight or really skinny, depending on your artistic talent and what else you're depicting, if you were a fan artist as an author, I'd probably like it. Continue to revel in the fact that people were inspired enough by what they read to be making art in the first place. Another thing I want to say from like an author's perspective is that right now, and I don't know if this will always be the case, but right now it's not actually fashionable to give like a full character profile. So there's no spot where I just stop and describe what Roxy looks like. You get little bits and pieces here and there. And this is even more the case with some of the secondary characters. I'll describe a hair color or an eye color. They'll fidget in a way that might imply they're tall or short, or they're slight, or they're bigger, but it's not actually directly stated. I don't think I give any descriptions of skin tone necessarily. So while Roxy's pictured as like very light skinned on this cover, Italian heritage could mean a range of things, and if you created like a Sicilian version of Roxy, that makes sense to me too. And I'm not really even sure if I as the author have the right to direct the conversation about what Roxy looks like. If this book ever hit it off and became a movie or a TV show, I would have minimal ability to control what my characters look like. And you know, I can think of a lot of actors and actresses for different roles who don't necessarily line up with my descriptions in the book, but I think would make a great version of one of my characters for various other reasons. You know, to me, physical descriptions is probably like one of the least important elements. You want to give just a couple of details, just enough to give someone like an idea of what they're working with when they're reading the book, but not so much that you're forcing to picture just this one look or feel. Maybe the only exception to this is if you are creating a character who you want a reader to specifically understand as a person of color or a disabled person, and the only only reason you might try and force the narrative then is because a lot of people default to assuming everyone in the book is white, and without those specific things notating a different skin color, they might not realize that this character they're reading about is non-white, which furthers erasure. And I will say that there are some differences. Like, if Roxy was a person of color and someone drew her as white, that might be kind of erasing. It might make me a little bit uncomfortable. It's something that I don't think I'd end up liking or mentioning in a blog or social media post or highlighting. So I do think if your character is a minority in some kind of way and people gender flip them, that might be a problem. I did mention that if people made Roxy a boy instead of a girl as a character, like just a fan art picture, I kind of think it would be fun. But me personally, I love when you gender flip stories. Like, if you do 12 Angry Men, the play is 12 Angry Women, I'm really into it. I would have loved a genuine Ghostbusters remake where instead of it being 4 men, it was 4 women. The only thing we change about it is how people treat women versus how people treat men, and maybe we go ahead and modernize for the time period. The idea of completely gender flipping a cast and playing it differently is very interesting to me. In Solo's, the Jenny episode, in my original uncut commentary, I had a whole 15-20 minutes where I pitched Jenny as John and what beats that would change and how that would have emotionally connected differently for me. And I just decided that it was really long. I didn't know how to cut it up and add it into that review, or even if it was worth it. There are other episodes and books too that are very strongly gendered, either masculinely or femininely, like you're telling a man's story or you're telling a woman's story, and intentionally swapping all the genders there to see how that changes the story is interesting and dynamic, and I think can be really empowering to everyone. I just think that you can get a lot from changing key elements of what a character looks like when you adapt something, or when you parody it, or when you make a fan fiction or a fan art of it. And especially with fan fiction and fan art where people aren't making any money from it, enjoy the creativity and the kind of like back and forth bubble it's created. Even as recently as Netflix's version of Shadow and Bone that we've just seen released, Alina was not originally half Shu within the Grishaverse universe. That was something that the director of Shadow and Bone added to it. Her original book was sort of like a metaphor for racism between the Grisha people and people without magic, and this like continued that metaphor. It's not just that people have prejudice against the Grisha, but they also have prejudice against different races in their society as well. It makes the whole narrative more complex, and for me it just added another wrinkle, another thing for us to talk about, and it made some of the comparisons between different harmful stereotypes with race or different kinds of racial prejudice a more open conversation that we could have. So I think all of that was good. And it came from changing the author's original version of that character to something a little bit different that would fit the show and would fit the time period and climate that we're in now. I do on one hand understand if an author's created a character to represent a certain minority group, why people want to preserve and hold on to that. But at the same time, especially if we're talking about fan art, fan fiction, which is a place where fans express enthusiasm for media, I think we need to leave space for them to do that. And I don't think it's an author's place to tell those people how to interpret their work or how to portray their characters. They've done the best they can in the book that they presented or in the movie that they presented. And beyond that, it starts to be really pushy. That's the kind of thing that everyone is entitled to their own opinion on. And if you just don't like someone else's fan art, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't look at it. Especially if the original text doesn't support that fan art. Maybe it's just not that big a deal. And that's possibly a hot take. And if so, there it is. I don't think authors are in charge of how readers take their characters or their scenario and setting and run with it. I don't even think speaking out against it is necessarily the way to go if you're an author and there's a part you don't like, as long as it's not actively hateful. Certainly, I do have a vested interest in this because I am a published author, and at some point in time, I would love to have a book that people actually want to do fan art on or want to write fan fiction about. But also, I'm involved in the fanish community. I consume a lot more media than I create. I am in the forums and I'm reading the fan fiction. I'm looking at the fan art. So it's not like I'm ignorant to either side of this. Whatever you're doing, keep creating and feeding your creative outlet. I hope you keep enjoying your books and your movies, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.